Okay, so we're a little bit, we'll go ahead and start to be sure that we get enough time to answer any questions. But the whole reason that I decided to do this was to give some, oh, there goes the bells. I wonder if there's a way to stop the bells. Probably not. So we'll probably hear bells coming in and out, but I apologize for that. The reason I decided to do this was basically Liam had mentioned to me, and I was in the process of getting it figured out. I wanted to do something that would explain the difference between transforming the experience-based brain and somatic resilience and regulation, along with any other touch-based training, and why transforming the experience-based brain would be different, and how I see transforming the experience-based brain. Just to give you a little bit of history, somatic resilience and regulation is a program that I developed along with Kathy Kane. She and I were in a hotel room in New York City several years ago, and she was encouraging me to do a program I'm working with just with children. After some conversation, we decided that everyone's a child who has developmental trauma. And looking from it from that basis of thinking, okay, developmental trauma is much more global than to just apply it to an age range. So if we looked at developmental trauma, we said developmental trauma was just children, we'd be leaving out a huge portion of the population. And so we decided to create somatic resilience and regulation, which is a 3-module training we work on. And there it's targeted about working with the child, using touch work, and bringing about a state of resolution for the adult or the child, regardless of the age coming through. From doing that program, I realized that there was still a need that wasn't being met in developmental trauma. And so transforming the experience-based brain came out of a belief or recognition that touch is extremely important. Touch is the cornerstone of the training because it meets the client in a nonverbal conversation. Understanding that developmental trauma itself, if I were to define it, how would I define developmental trauma? I would say it was your earliest memory previous to the time period previous to your earliest memory. So if you came in and you said, I don't remember anything before junior high school, I'd say your developmental trauma probably lasted all the way through the age of 12 or 13, depending on when you started middle school or junior high. Or it may be an earlier memory, but looking at developmental trauma, the majority of it that has the most severe effect seems to be that occurs early on, either in utero or right after birth within the first few years. Thinking about that time period, it's a very non-verbal. It isn't a time period where people are talking because they don't have any sort of explicit memory. They have nothing. The only memory you have of those earlier days is a somatic imprint, a somatic memory. Your body, your muscles, they're all remembering, even though you're...
Oh, Mars just texted me. He wants to know if he could still pick up the table.
I don't know who that is. I have no idea who's talking about a table, but if they need it, it's probably a good idea to get it. I'm going back through to be sure that I've muted everyone. I apologize for that. I don't know where that came from, but anyway, when we're looking at developmental trauma, we're definitely looking at it from the standpoint of there's no conversation. It's living physiologically in our systems, and we have basically a minefield. Our body holds that information like a minefield because it doesn't remember how big it was either. There's no prefrontal cortex coming in and saying, oh, this was just a little trauma or this was a big trauma. It can't differentiate. So body itself is like a minefield. It's got all these separations and all of these traumas held throughout it. So using touch and realizing the touch is important is the keystone of transforming the experience-based brain, also somatic resilience regulation. But looking at it from the basis of an attachment-focused touch. It's not just a touch, it's an attachment-focused touch, which is different. That's moving from the standpoint of saying, okay, through this relationship, the relationship that I have with my client while they're on the table, the relationship I have in the room or in the space, whether I'm using intention or actual touch, it's about this relationship. And repair and healing come through the relationship. Understanding that at the time when I'm working with my client, I'm stepping in. I'm going to become, on some level, I'm going to become a substitute parent for my client. If they're going into that early stage of going in and finding out that, all right, here I am, I'm trying to get through this, but I can't get through it alone. So if something happened in the first 6 weeks or 9 weeks of my life where I might have been alone, not even by parents making me be alone, that I end up being alone because of the fact that either a medical condition or something has happened, some reason I'm not able to have that reassurance in those first 6 weeks of life, then it gives me the opportunity as a therapist that I'm coming into the role of parent and I can repair what didn't happen. And we do our repair, we start thinking about repair. In transforming, we look at repair as either structural dissociation, coming in with a new language of being able to drop in and say, okay, what's happening here? What's going on in the system? A new language of parts, understanding that if we're working with a window of tolerance and seeing that the defensive accommodations, as we've previously always referred to them as defensive accommodations, and how a person gets through or survives or lives with a certain behavior, what we're doing with transforming touch is we're looking at all of those symptoms, what we call those symptoms or defensive accommodations. All of those are now survival parts. So we have language survival parts, we have somatic survival parts, we have multiple behavior survival parts, we have spiritual survival parts, we have all sorts of survival parts. But what's important about that is that when we meet the client, wherever the client is at that moment is normal. So take that in for a moment and realize, oh yeah, they're normal. Why would they be normal? If they're using all of these defensive accommodations, which in effect, defensive accommodations in themselves act as parasympathetic response. If we're looking at sympathetic arousal occurring repeatedly, we know that the sympathetic arousal stresses on the system. We know that sympathetic arousal is bringing on the threat response. If that's repeatedly occurring, as it does in developmental trauma, then the parasympathetic oftentimes misses the connection. So then we develop these other defensive accommodations that become kind of like faux parasympathetic response. To keep me safe, I'm going to keep popping in over here and going, oh, okay, I get it now. I get it because I'm using this to hold down the sympathetic so that I appear somewhat regulated to the outside world. Outside meaning outside of my body and my own system. So if we look at that as normal, I want to move that client from normal to a new normal. That's a different way, thinking about going from normal to new normal. Wow, I've spent all this time over here hearing that there's something wrong with me. Either I've been diagnosed with a personality disorder, such as borderline personality disorder, or something has come about that people have found me not tolerable. Their systems can't tolerate being around my system, and so they push me away, or I end up in these positions. And instead of going in there and pathologizing that, we go in and say, well, that's normal. That was normal for your system to survive. Your system needed to be able to create these artificial parasympathetic responses so that it could stay safe. The only way your system was able to stay safe is by understanding that, yes, this is necessary. This is what I'm going to use. I'm going to come over here to the defensive accommodation. I'm going to take this, I'm going to put it with this, and this equals safety. And I'm creating a safe place for me to live and exist. That safety is all about realizing that, oh yeah, this is normal. I'm showing up normal, not pathologized, not sick, not something wrong with me. I'm really just coming about saying, this is what I need in order to maintain a sense of safety in my life. And so it's different because we're looking from the standpoint of neuroplasticity. We're thinking, okay, when I started working in attachment, not so many years ago, but when I started working in attachment, the common belief was that the window closes. Kids do not attach after the age of 3. That window of opportunity shut, and from that point forward, we now have some major diagnosis like reactive attachment disorder or some other situation is coming about. And because we have reactive attachment or whatever, this child can never be healed, can never find a sense of regulation. This is it. Well, that we know today that that was 100% false. That everyone, regardless of your age, has the capacity, if they have the capacity. That's probably a key point there, because if you don't have the capacity to heal, you're not going to be able to heal. But coming from that standpoint, okay, I need a certain amount of capacity to heal means that I'm able to maintain a sense of safety around me in order for my system to heal. I have the capacity. So if I can bring a body or a person or a client or a patient or whatever you want to call them into optimal regulation, optimal setting. In the best of settings, we know that however we were created, that if we're in the best of harmony, that all of our systems are harmonized and everything is where it's supposed to be and working, then our system heals itself. Peter Levine said that years ago. It's been said over and over and over and over and over that in the best of conditions, we can heal ourselves. What we do with transforming touch is that we're bringing that client towards the best of regulation. We're bringing them into that sense of regulation and safety through the idea of attachment-focused touch, transforming touch. By touching into someone, we're building a relationship with them, we're creating a safety net, and we're allowing them to begin to find a sense of regulation. One of the things that I created was a pyramid of healing. And looking at the pyramid of healing, on the bottom of the pyramid is a big area called I don't know. My experience over the years of working with many, many different clients was to understand that I don't know was very important. I don't know is almost a signal to someone, to me anyway, it's a signal that, oh yeah, this is probably developmental trauma. Because of it being somatic, I don't know makes total sense. I don't know why I do this behavior. I don't know why I do that. I don't know why I can't have relationships. I don't know that people say I'm this or I'm that, but I don't know why I don't have any friends. I don't know why. And the I don't know why, as as the client begins to recover or move towards a new normal, that I don't know moves up to another level. The next level that it goes to is oftentimes it's illogical. It doesn't even make sense. I don't have any friends because I grew up in a red house and all the rest of the houses on my street were blue, except there was a green one and a yellow one, and the logic doesn't hold water. So they get kind of caught in that illogical, they make up illogical reasons for why they behave or why they're acting in a certain situation to the way that they're choosing to act. After they've been in that illogical, they'll begin to go, okay, this doesn't make sense, and they'll start shifting as they're getting closer to a new normal. That new normal then could appear that it's very concrete. It has to be this way, or it has to be this way. You know, there's no in between, there's no gray area. Everything is either this or this, and there's nothing in the middle. There's no space. There's no way to figure out anything. There's no way to understand that part. Well, if we see that as another new normal, we can move out of that. Because what's happening in that concrete and in the I don't know and in the illogical is that our focus, our locus of control, is more external. We're more blaming. It's somebody else's fault. It's some other reason that's outside of me because I don't have control over it. I feel like I have no control. So working with our clients, we want to move them to the next new normal. And the next new normal that's coming in would be even though. Even though, because even though is different than concrete, because in concrete we get yes, but. Yes, you're right, Steve. You're exactly right in what you're saying, but have you thought about this? Because this is probably more right. Or, but I can't leave the house today. I can't walk out to go get the mail. I can't find my way out of isolation. And so as they move into even though, we know that even though is probably the first clear moment that the client has moved away from complete external locus of control and starting to bring it back into internal locus of control. And their dysfunctional autonomic nervous system that they've been using for regulation, all of a sudden is starting to move to a more functional self-regulation. An example of that I've given a million times probably, so some of you will have heard this, is you're standing in line at the grocery store, the person in front of you has a very strong cologne on. You smell that cologne, and if you're in the I don't know, for no apparent reason at all, you're highly triggered and activated. You throw your stuff down and you run out the door. You escape, you get away from there, you go away. As you move up to even though, you're able to go, you know, this is really powerful. I can smell this cologne. I know I'm being triggered, but I can manage it. I can either go to another line and check out through another cash register, or I could choose to leave and come back, or maybe I'll just go walk through the store again and return to this spot. So by looking at it that way, we start to realize, oh yeah, we have other options in the even though. Therapeutically wise, if you've worked with a client who is living in a dysfunctional autonomic nervous system, and they're always using lots of defensive accommodations, they're using lots of faux parasympathetic interventions in their life, they're kind of stuck over here, and all of a sudden they have the power to say, even though, that's when they're done. That's when they're going to say, I'm done with therapy. I want to leave. This is so much better. You have been the best therapist I've ever known in my life. You've healed me. My life is new. And all of a sudden you hear bells ringing in the room. The reality is that that's a really cool space. And yeah, it's really a lot of bells may ring, but there's another stage, and that's the total awareness stage, the very last, the peak. And in awareness, we move into a balance of external and internal locus of control. We start saying, okay, it's not only outside, it's inside and outside. And looking at these, I begin to find that I have much more responsibility for my life. But what happens with the self-regulation piece, it becomes co-regulation. And in co-regulation, your unconscious self is now standing in the grocery line. And without any real thought at all that you're having to manage in your prefrontal cortex, your brain goes, wait a minute, what do I want to do with this? Oh, okay, why don't we look around? Oh, look, there's somebody over there in that other line, and I'm going to hook into their autonomic nervous system, and I'm going to begin co-regulating, and there's somebody over there. And so it's automatically sending out all of these beams of connection to co-regulation. And in co-regulation, I don't have to think about it. I'm now going, wow, this is really different. Because I don't have to use my prefrontal cortex. It takes less thought, which means less energy, which means I have more energy to grow. That's the important part of the relationship. We grow through the relationship. We grow with one another. We grow with our therapist. In Transforming Touch, we begin to grow with our therapist. We're able to say, oh, this is really different. Or I can use visualization with my client. I can have my client, I can be working with them on the table, but the sweet part is that it doesn't take me being a great sensitive feeler with my hand where I know exactly what's happening inside the system. It's done more with intention. I still touch, but instead of waiting for the body to say, okay, you're all done here, it's time to go to the next place, and I'm going to work here now, and then I'm going to go to the next place and work here, we have brought about the 7-point regulation protocol. And in the 7-point regulation protocol, you use a clock. The reason you use a clock is because when you're evaluating whether or not something is happening, you're in the left brain. And if you're asking your client every few seconds, how are you now? What's happening to you now? How are things going now? What do you notice now? Every time you ask your client a question, you take them from right brain to left brain. There is no healing in the left brain. I might talk myself into some weird thought that I'm doing something, or I may be able to maintain a behavior for a while, but the strength of the change isn't there unless it's happening in the right brain. So right brain to right brain is where I want to be. So if I'm touching into the client, I want to be in relationship with the client. I'm not worried about what's happening underneath as much as I'm worried about our relationship and right brain to right brain. So I'm watching a clock and I'm moving through these steps, and I'm bringing in a lot of compassion, understanding, empathy. And in that language, when we talk about language of trauma, we use a lot of empathy. I'm really sorry this happened to you. I'm really sorry that you experienced this. I know it must have been very difficult. I'm really sorry. And you start making rupture and repair. You're repairing ruptures you had nothing to do with. It's one of the most difficult things to get therapists, parents, partners in relationship to understand that as soon as somebody takes responsibility, the healing begins. And the healing can be, the responsibility can be done at the therapist. The therapist can say, I'm sorry I wasn't there. If I would have been there, things would have been different for you. Or things might have been different from you. And I wish you wouldn't have had to experience it the way you experienced it. So bring in that compassionate language, that really empathetic language that is saying, you know, I'm right here with you. You're not alone this time. I know the first time you went through this, you may have felt completely alone. This time, you're not alone. I am here with you. I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to stay in position right here with you the whole time so that you don't feel that sense of abandonment. Oftentimes with adults as well as children who have been affected by developmental trauma, we know that they have a metaphor running through their head of, I'm going to die, or the world is not a safe place. I can't trust anyone. Everyone is out to get me. All of these fears are very real, And we use visualization. We bring up visualization and we say, okay, if this is your normal now, and you visualize something different, a different normal, a new normal, what would that new normal be like? And what happens if we just pendulate between those two and do some titration work? What happens if that's happening while we're supporting kidney adrenals, or we're supporting brainstem, or we're supporting the mediastinum, wherever we are in our support system? How much more powerful that's going to be for the client when they go, oh yeah, this is different. This is a different way for me to be. This is a different way for me to respond. The other part of transforming the experience-based brain that we bring in that a lot of therapists don't do, and they don't refer out to, is we bring in all the primitive reflexes. We bring in, this is how you check for it, this is an evaluation for it, and then we bring in a repair based on touch. And the repair protocol is going to be an attachment-based protocol. So we may be doing something similar to what someone else might be doing in their protocol for primitive reflexes, but we're doing it from the attachment focus, from the relationship point of view, understanding that in that relationship, we are much more likely, and we're not rushing the process, where some primitive reflex work will say, oh, you can do this in 30 days, or you can do this in 60 days. It may take a year to do one reflex, or it may take longer. Understanding that developmental trauma didn't just happen. It didn't just pop in, or that's very interesting. I'm hearing sound too, but I can't figure out where it's coming from. There we go. So we know that it takes longer because we're not only just bringing it into the system and trying to repair the system for primitive reflexes, we're also doing a limbic installation with it. And a limbic installation is because oftentimes when things are missed early on, what we find out about is that they bypass because of either some sense of shame or grief or just unavailability. Information entered the prefrontal cortex and it shot right back into the reptilian brain, and it didn't land in the limbic system. So we also do a limbic installation with all of the primitive reflexes. We start out now working with fear paralysis, which is the earliest one. And if you think about fear paralysis, if it was left on, that one reflex, every other reflex after that is affected. Stephen Porges talks about platforms. Bruce Perry talks about neurosequential development. All of these are about coming in and replacing what's missing. Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if we look at it, we see on it there's oxygen, there's water, there's food, there's shelter, there's clothing, there's, all of these things that are on Maslow's hierarchy of need. What we find is that many times someone's missing that in developmental trauma. They're missing these early platforms. So we want to allow the system to reconstruct platforms. When we're talking about shock trauma, this is one of the things that gets confusing. If we're working in shock trauma, there's a place to go back to. In the idea of shock trauma, it says all of these things developed the way they were supposed to. All of these things went into place the way they were supposed to. And what happens because of that is that there's a place to go back to. When we're looking at, from the standpoint that there isn't a place to go back to, and we think about developmental trauma, there's nowhere to return. There's no good, safe place to go back to, because every place is through the lens of danger. And when we look at fear paralysis, we know that fear paralysis definitely puts us in the lens of the world's a dangerous place. So we start looking at oxygen levels, we start looking at how well people are breathing. Should we be doing some sort of organized breath work with the client if they were born with cords wrapped around their neck? How do we look at them? What are we going to do about the cord? How do we remove the cord later on? All of these are considerations where we're looking from the developmental trauma standpoint. There's a whole lot going on that was missed, and we want to bring those back in so that we can create new platforms or platforms at all. So it's not just new platforms, there may have never been a platform. So the brain says, okay, or the development period says, okay, we have 5 things that are supposed to have happened. Only 4 of them happened. So, and then another platform comes down, that new platform would be sitting on 4 instead of 5. So the whole foundation is off in the very beginning. And looking at it from that standpoint, realizing that our body, our brain, our mind takes that unbalanced platform and says, this is normal. We'll correct it by doing a behavior. We'll correct it by some other way, but this is normal. So to come back in and put those new parts in that were missing from the beginning, it can scare someone to death. It can put someone in a state of fear. It can make them go into a place that is uncomfortable. If you have been born with a lens of fear, and your whole, all the way through utero, you've been in fear, and then you're born and a lens of fear is around you, and fear is normal. Fear is like static. It's like white noise in the background going, and it's making all this noise back here in the background. But what we know is, oh yeah, we take away that noise, and what's there? Silence. And silence can be one of the most threatening of threats. It can cause our system to go into overload. As the HPA axis, is triggering the adrenals. The adrenals are dumping all of that adrenaline and all of that cortisol into our system that we need for fight and flight and freeze. When it does it until it runs dry, our systems become, in their normal, they can have multiple illness. They can become a lot of dis-ease. There's a lot of dis-ease in the system. We can see a lot of autoimmune coming on board. We can see a lot of walking, breathing, every part, sexual, all sorts of these issues that are coming alive and causing a sense of a disruption in the person's life, but they just adapt to it. They just keep adapting because that's how our body's supposed to do. Our brain says, okay, this has happened, we'll adapt to it. We'll adapt. One of the greatest signs of adaptation and the ability our brain has to adapt is, someone who's born with no arms and legs, but they can drive a car with their feet, or they can eat with their feet. I could never. I can barely walk with my feet without tripping. So I can't imagine what it's like to have that much compensation. But as we remove the compensation, we have to play a balance in there, and it has to happen in relationship. And we have to tell our clients, you know, this is what might happen. You might get afraid. It could be a little scary for you. Your symptoms might get worse for a moment. You know, you could actually feel worse for a time being instead of moving completely to better. In transforming the experience-based brain, that's what we're doing. We're coming in, we're using touch, we're using times. The other good benefit of using time movement and timed work is, in the beginning, we're asking permission. We're getting full permission from our client in their prefrontal cortex, but also somatically. We're using gratitude. We're grateful that those parts, when we're moving, we're thinking gratitude, and we're bringing gratitude into it. But we're teaching the body trust. The somatic self begins to build trust because it knows exactly what you're going to do. You're not going to be on this side 5 minutes and on this side 10 minutes, or here or there. This is saying, okay, we're going to build trust in this system that has never felt trust. The way we're going to build this trust is by being consistently doing what we say we're going to do. It's by being consistent and saying, okay, I'm going to show up this way, or I'm going to show up this way, but I'm going to do it every time. I'm asking permission to do it. There's no big surprise, and we're all in agreement. So through transforming touch, we're doing all of these parts. We're building relationship. We're coming in, we're looking at neuroception, the ability to tell if we're safe. We're seeing that as ruptured. We're bringing that in as a platform. We're looking at proprioception, how we fit to the earth, how we're balanced out. We're looking at the vestibular system. What does the vestibular system need? How can we bring in balance and regulation? How can we repair rupture? We're bringing in all of these parts to create a more holistic healing. We also have other people on our team we refer out to, nutritionists, or to chiropractors, or osteopaths, all sorts of people who are also in the healing modality, where they're coming in and they understand what we're doing and we understand what they're doing, and we work together. So we center on these goals, and the biggest goal is we're going to move the client from I don't know, or illogical, or concrete. We're going to move them up into even though and into greater awareness, so that they can move to what we're all supposed to be, and that is we're all have an innate sense that we should all move towards joy. We should all have happiness. We should all be able to experience satisfying moments. We're all supposed to be able to have relationship and friendship, where it doesn't have to be so darn hard, where we can say, okay, I have tools, I'm working with someone. You know, interesting, I get a lot of consultation calls. Therapists want to earn their money. Whether you're a body worker, a craniosacral person, whether you're a massage therapist, a psychotherapist, a psychologist, whatever you are. There's a funny part that we feel like the more we do is the more we earn our money. That is such a wrong thought. If there's such a thing as a wrong thought, that would be such a negative thought for our systems. Less is always better. Less is much better on the system. It gives the system more space to grow and develop, and then the system doesn't have to respond in a way as we go through things like structural dissociation, where we understand this, that people-pleasing part comes forward, or an angry part, and we're looking at these parts and we're able to say, wow, these parts were all necessary. All of the defensive accommodations, every one of those defensive accommodations was necessary for the client to feel safe. None of them were just random thoughts. They all came about because the client wanted to have a sense of safety. So that's pretty much what transforming touch, that's how it comes in different. It's attachment based, it's biophysiological, it's neurophysiology, bringing in all of these chemistries, bringing in all of this and using touch to meet into that nonverbal part instead of trying to talk someone out of where they are. You know, if you're using basic talk therapy, it's coming in and saying, okay, I'm not going to do this. I can come in and work with a client, nonverbal to nonverbal, in a relational manner that they may not be used to. And I could build up this relationship, and maybe it's going to take more. Maybe I'm going to have to disclose more of myself. Maybe I'm going to have to say, you know, I'm going to be out of the office next week because I'm teaching a workshop in Durham, North Carolina, instead of just saying I'm going to be out of the office next week and I need to cancel your appointment. Giving people more information about us begins to create more safety. Not disclosing, oh, I'm going to be on flight 407 at 2 p.m. and I'll be landing at this time, but giving our clients saying, okay, you can still reach me. I might take 24 hours to get back to you, but you're welcome to call me, or you're welcome to text me, you know, figuring out how to stay in relationship with our clients. It's a different way of working because, you know, when I went through graduate school, my professor said, oh, you should never have more than one borderline or two borderlines in your practice, ever. I have a whole practice of borderlines. They're all ages. I have kids and adults. They're all could fall under that classification. But we leave that pathologizing outside. And we see, oh yeah, you had to create all of these parts to be safe. Why would I think that those parts are bad if they kept you safe? Why would I judge anything you're doing and say, oh, well, that's not safe, or that's something else coming through? I want to stay in relationship. The way I stay in relationship is that I look at those parts with gratitude, regardless of what they are. I say, oh yeah, thank you to that part. I'm really grateful you were there, that you were able to keep the client alive, that you were instrumental in orchestrating safety for the client. What I'd like to do now is open up for any questions you have about transforming touch or any part at all. Just signal me and I can unmute you, or I can unmute everyone. We'll try with signal me if you have a question or a comment you want to add. Anyone? Some of you are, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you so you'll hear other people. So if you're playing the radio and watching TV, we're going to catch it right now as you begin to pop in. If you have something going on in your office and you want to stay muted, you just click your button. And right now we have one big room full of people. All right. I think I hit them all. So who's ever playing the radio, if you could turn your radio off, that would be great. All right. I think everybody that wanted to be unmuted is unmuted. All right. Any questions that you might have about transforming touch or healing developmental trauma? Somebody's playing music and I don't know where that's coming from. There you go. Good stuff. Just let me know and I can answer your question.
Steve, I have a question.
Where are you? There you are,
Right
Jen.
here.
I see you now.
Hi.
Hi, Jen. Welcome.
Thank you. The level. I'm curious about your level of self-care that's needed to be that available for relationship. And
It's important.
What happens when you meet your own capacity? Where's the place where you meet your own capacity? Yeah, I'm working with meeting my own resistance, you know, or meeting my own capacity as a mother of, you know, small children,
Right.
and how much I can be in relationship. How do you navigate that dance of your own boundary and capacity?
That's a really good question, Jen. And what I think is that I tell therapists, if you're working and all of a sudden you realize you're at your capacity, go back to the basic, go back to 7 point, go back to do this basic regulation work. We add on to the regulation part. We're always doing regulation, but we add those parts in. In self-regulation, we have to take time for ourselves. We have to figure out what we need to reboot. So I tell clients, I'm not responding to anybody after 10 o'clock at night, regardless of what's happening. If you're in a very serious situation, go to emergency room, go somewhere, because I'm asleep and I have to sleep. Or if I'm on a, not available, and I tell people, I say, it might take me 24 hours. As a parent, that's more difficult with your own children, but as a therapist, we still have to show those good parts of how to do self-care is modeling to our clients. So we still do that. We're still able to say, like this weekend, I'm not going to be available at all. Sorry, I'm going to be on vacation. Or next week, I'm going to be out the whole week. If you email me and I check emails, I'll get it, but I don't promise any response. So I just tell my clients what's going on, and I just explain, I'm not available, I'm not available.
Thank you.
And take care of yourself. And it's important, we're the worst as therapists to know how to go for a walk or drink water, or, as my friend told me from the Antarctica, or the Arctic Circle, she said, the way to do this is that, you should wash your hands between every session with more salt. I laugh at that because I thought that's really an interesting thought. If I wash my hands with more salt after every session, is this really going to help me? What it did is it put me in a ritual, Jen. It put me in a ritual that helped me very much. Because now when I'm washing my hands, I'm releasing all the energy from that client. I'm letting it go back to them. Anything that might have stuck to my hand or stuck to me, I'm letting it go back. I'm washing them. That old commercial, I'm going to wash that man right out of my hair. It's kind of that idea, if you're old enough to remember that. And that's what I do with the Morton salt. I wash that client right out of my hair. They're gone, and then I'm ready. I take the moment, I drink some water, I take time for myself. But self-care is very important in doing this work.
Do you acknowledge that your capacity is elastic and that it expands and shrinks, and you try and be as transparent about that as possible?
If it takes space for my client to do 2 somersaults, I try to hold 2 somersaults. But if I don't have that much space in me, because, I might have started out the morning with, something with my own children or something in my own life interfered, and I'm stressed over this, and I show up, I realize immediately I might not have full capacity today. So I'm going to work for what I have available. If I go beyond what I have available, I'm just creating another system that's going to be dependent on another defensive accommodation. Another part of me, survival parts, could have to swoop in. Maybe, oh yeah, I worked so hard today, I now deserve a double chocolate ice cream cone. Things that may not be helpful, I start bringing in. But if I can measure my own capacity by how I'm feeling, and that's what I'm showing to my clients, then my clients begin to monitor that too, because they're learning from how I'm acting and how I'm interacting with them. So it brings more strength into the relationship. Other questions?
Hey, Steve.
Hello, how are you, Robin?
Good.
Are you in Arizona today?
I am in Arizona. We just got snow last night, so I'm very excited.
Ooh, how much did you get?
About this much.
That's a lot of snow.
Yeah, we'd only been getting a lot of rain, so it was good to have it.
Excellent, excellent. Maybe you can ski a little bit over towards the Grand Canyon or something.
Good. Just take a little thing.
Yes, what's your question?
I jumped in a little late, so you maybe talked about this some before I came in, but you were talking about the different stages, and I came in when you were talking about going from I don't know why to the
The logical.
yeah. And so I'm curious about how you think of, well, I guess maybe that would be the illogical. It's so common for people to say, oh, it's because there's something inherently wrong with me. Like even before I was born or before I came into this existence, my being itself has something inherently wrong with it.
Yes, and epigenetics are important. I mean, where you came from is important. And I look at it in Transforming Touch, let's bring that part in. You know, you be that part if that's what you want to do. Visualize what it would be like. What would it be like to be an inherently bad person? What is that like for you? What picture comes to mind? And so I don't meet it with resistance. I meet it with acceptance and say, okay, let's look at that. Let's visualize, and you tell me more about that. Well, my grandmother or my great-grandfather or my great-great-grand or whatever, wherever it came in lineage-wise, what would it be like to be that person? What's going to be? And so we do some conversation around visualization and memory and bringing that in. Inherently bad is normally an illogical thought. It's normally stuck in the illogical. But if we meet any part coming along with anything other than agreement, we are creating resistance, which creates separation. And so I'm going to meet it more with acceptance, empathy, and understanding, knowing that this is an important part of you that's kept you alive. You have a part that's saying, I'm inherently bad. That is actually a survival part that has actually kept you alive. It's actually helped you manipulate the world, manipulate your way through the world. So I see it as positive. I really like the illogical. I like when someone shows up like that. There's lots to work with there. Tons. Does that help?
Yeah.
Excellent. Any other questions?
Steve, I have a question all the way from Ireland.
Go ahead, Liam, all the way from Cork, Ireland.
It's in relation to parts, Steve. With developmental trauma, are you likely to get more parts?
More past or paths?
Parts.
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 Yes.
Thank you for whoever interpreted Irish for me. If you go to my website right now, on my front page is a photograph I took in Ireland. I love Ireland.
And there's another section to the question then, Steve.
Yes. Let me say this, Liam, you don't only get your biological past, which is going to have, your biological history is going to have enough parts created. You're also going to create parts from your adoptive family.
Mm.
We're going to bring, your room of healing is going to be much larger than someone who isn't adopted. So
Okay.
we're looking at it this way, and we're looking at parts, there's going to be more parts in the room.
Okay. And the second part of that question then is, are the parts going to be represented internally in very interesting ways?
Yes.
I'll give you an example. I have a client and he talks about parts. And when he notices them inside, he sees them like little cartoon figures, like a little witch or a little dog, you know, and that like images. So is that common?
Yes. And what he's done is he's kind of gone through that I don't know, and he's kind of bordering on the illogical. And so he's creating images that make sense to him. Those are survival images.
Okay.
Those parts, how he sees them is how he's classifying. He hasn't moved up. There's not enough capacity yet to look at it and really work with it. They're just now appearing. They're all coming forward, and he's getting these appearance of parts, but he's putting a label on them. He's coming in and saying, in order for me to be safe, this part needs to be a witch, or this part needs to be something secretive. And by looking at it from the parts that way, that's how he's managing to stay safe.
Okay.
So I would show a lot of gratitude to those parts.
Okay. And so when he gets more regulation on board, them images are likely to change?
Well, he's likely to get to a place, Liam, where he looks at those images and goes, wow, I wonder what I was thinking. I don't need that image anymore. And so he's consciously going to let it disappear, or it's just going to fade away. It'll evaporate into the ozone layer. It just kind of goes away with him not having to do anything. Just all of a sudden, they're not there anymore.
Okay.
Because there's no need. They'll hang on for dear life. I mean, any one of our parts will hang on for all it's worth. I mean, they do not want to let go. They want to hang on, the survival parts, because the message they got is, without me, you die. And most of us, that is not the plan. We don't want to die. Even though we may have got a message that we're going to die, death is not the first choice.
Sure.
Does that help?
Very much.
Great, Liam. Thank you. Any other questions? Hello.
I have a question. Okay, so in working with a client potentially who can't attach, cannot trust, let alone have you touch them, just how do you wiggle your way in there with them?
Well, one of the ways that I believe, Kim, is that everyone can attach and everyone can be touched. So start changing your mindset and say, okay, underneath this fierce amount of resistance, which is a fight response coming in, this is a strong fight. Don't touch me, don't touch me, don't touch me. That's a good fight, or avoidant could be a flight. More than likely it's a fight part coming in. If I look at that fight part and I'm grateful for it, and I say, let's just try it today with you. If I have a table, getting on the table. If I don't have a table, you might be sitting next to me or in a chair next to me. And saying, instead of me touching you, you just think about the possibility of you touching me. I'll put my hand out. This side of the hand is much more sensitive. This side is not as sensitive. You can touch me. Let's just try this out for a while. You know, we don't have to jump right into anything. Let's take our time, look at it from the idea. We have plenty of time. You didn't get here in a flash. The attachment part happens by you being vulnerable to the client. You know, if you want to just sit here, if you want to lay on the table, I'll sit in the chair next to you. If you want to sit on the table, I'll sit in the chair. If you want to sit on the sofa, I'll sit in the chair. If you want me to sit next to you, we can build up. Maybe we'll sit next to each other, and as you feel like it, just let your knee move over and touch me. You know, let's just see which part of you, because I know there's a part of you that wants something different. So when you visualize now and you visualize the new normal, what's it look like? And in between there is the conversation we're going to have. Whether it's a touch conversation or somatic conversation of some sort is going to be occurring to bring you back where you have more capacity, where this doesn't feel so threatening. Because right now your little system's saying, whoa, get back, get back. Could be a fear paralysis reflex that never turned off too. Maybe they're still in that early stage of fear where touch is just way too much, way too much. And some people are that way, and we just do it through basic exposure. You know, let's expose a little. You touch me if you can. We'll start out in the position. We'll do it with intention. If you worked in an agency that didn't allow touch, how would you bring this about? Well, you would just say, okay, let me use intention. I'm going to intentionally touch your kidneys. And you just visualize that happening, and let's see if you notice any feeling in your kidney region while I'm touching you. So it's more about hearing where they are, not meeting it with resistance, not coming in like a bulldozer to push them, coming in and saying, you know, I can really hear your fear. I really hear you don't want to be touched. I'm okay with that. I know that touch is great for building regulation and healing you somatically, that it really has the potential to build relationship. But we can build relationship by you reaching out to me instead of me reaching out to you. That puts all the control and all the power back over to them. And I'm not taking anything away. I'm just letting that come about. I'm letting that happen. And there's where we start to build up this new place of being without so much, you know, resistance means separation, and no one's going to heal. In a perfect transforming session, as someone moves up into that state of awareness, as a therapist, I feel just as good as my client, because we're in this relationship together, and I'm going to feel good when it's over. In the beginning, I might leave the session and feel like crap because there's so much going on in your system that I'm having to do all the give. But as a person heals, it becomes a mutual relationship, and it floats back and forth.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else have a question? Hi.
I do. Hi. I have a few questions, and I want to ask, is there an echo?
There is a little echo, but I think I'm going to mute. You're up here twice, so I'm going to.
Yeah, that's why.
I'm going to remove one of you. And
Thank you.
Then there'll just be one of you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I think I'd like to ask all three of my questions because I think they connect in a way that I don't understand, but you might.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll see what happens.
The first one was you talked about limbic architecture sometimes getting bypassed, and that you're coming, and I was kind of wondering how that constellates developmentally. I'm also wondering about how all of this experience-based brain work intersects with sensory issues and learning disabilities, which might indicate something neuroatypical that's not related to trauma. And so those are my questions.
Okay. I only got 2 out of there.
I know.
So,
I morphed the second one into 2 questions.
Okay. So
I added sensory to learning issues.
All right. My experience with people who have sensory issues respond extremely well. The same as people that are in the autistic community respond extremely well. The scarier part is we need to work slower because there's greater fear in change. Because slight change is extremely threatening with someone who has a lot of sensory issues coming through. Anytime we have greater capacity in our nervous system, in the autonomic nervous system, we tend to have more space, which means that sensory issues begin to resolve. They begin to shift and change. Mm-hmm. Even someone with neuroatypical development patterns, without what's considered trauma, I consider that trauma. Mm-hmm. I consider neuroatypical developmental patterns as trauma. Something didn't, the way it was intended to develop, it did not develop in that way, the way it was created to develop, whatever. But I also see that as normal for that person. So moving that person still, regardless if it's neuroatypical or if it's separation of parent or if it's a toxic invasion, wherever we're looking, the client can benefit from more regulation and more capacity. Because of neural pathways, and my belief that neural pathways, they can develop new neural pathways that'll become more functional maybe. Also with capacity building and giving them more capacity, they might have an opportunity. They may never be the same normal that the majority of the population is. But they may have more capacity within their normal. So it's not about taking someone to where I want to see them. It's about taking someone and expanding their capacity of their normal to move their normal to a new normal that's for their system.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? That we're not going to come over here. There is a thing called spontaneous remission. That is possible that you can come in and cause an immediate healing response in someone. If there's a neurodevelopment misfiring, or something has happened atypical in that neurodevelopment, it is definitely much more challenging. But it is not impossible and can be reached in the same way by building relationship and working somatically with the client.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Does anything resonate with that? The question about how the limbic architecture tends to get, were you saying it gets bypassed kind of, there are pieces that get missed developmentally? I'm just curious about kind of a circuit going from early brain to prefrontal, sort of missing limbic. I'm curious.
It's probably going the other way. More
okay.
Frontal going back to the reptilian. The limbic brain is more emotional. So the emotions are there. Oftentimes with developmental trauma, we see either an intensified emotion, like someone's on a spectrum of anger that they can't go into any sense of safety to even have glad, happy, sad, glad, and mad. They just have mad. And so one end of the spectrum of mad looks happy, but it's really mad. And the other end is they're really mad, ragefully mad. So bringing those emotions in and understanding that if there's a lot of trauma, emotions don't develop. With developmental trauma, there's less chance that someone's going to have a full bouquet of emotions. They're going to have much more limited emotions. And so we want to start bringing emotions back in our work. And so we do limbic installation at the end of every session. We're bringing back in something into the limbic system so that the limbic system becomes aware of emotion and bringing those parts in. That is often bypassed. And we know in shame itself, when shame occurs, it's in the prefrontal and it bypasses the reptilian because it's a rescue and goes into a survival part. So it's just about reestablishing greater limbic capacity. And limbic capacity means that I have more options emotionally.
That's
Not
great.
everything in life is good or bad. Life can now be a little bit good and a little bit bad, or it could be exciting, or it could be even joyful, or it could be heartbreaking, or it could be very, very sad. And I have a greater range, and I'm always building range of emotion. Because I definitely, when you get into survival and you think, I'm going to die unless something happens, the emotion is also pushed out of the way. Just like food coming into our stomach, our gastric, the need to digest, all of those parts are affected. But so is emotion. We don't need emotion at that point. Emotion doesn't serve us. Emotion is going to get neglected in the developmental part.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Anyone else have a question? All right. It is, it looks like we're past time a little bit. I really appreciate you coming in. If you're interested in a training, go to my website. There's listed. We're all over the place right now, which is a really positive thing. We keep getting invited in new cities and new places, so things are definitely moving positively. So I appreciate you all being here today. If you have an additional question, you're welcome to email me, and you will get a copy of this recording as soon as it comes out of the cloud, and the cloud says, oh, that recording is now ready. I will send it on to you, so you'll have a recording of today's brief little experience. And I'm really, really grateful that everyone was here. And thank you very much. I wish you all well. Robin built a snowman for me over there. And we will be hopefully seeing you at a training or seeing you somewhere in the future. Thank you so much.
So good to see you.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, y'all.
Everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.